Once upon a time, in a land far, far, far away, actually it was 25 years ago, it was the 8th of June 2001, very specifically. I'm pretty sure it was a Friday, and I enjoyed that day the rare experience of, well, somewhat rare experience of gaining sight that I didn't even know I'd lost, or at least beginning to gain new sight, given that it takes the eyes and brain a while to relearn how to work together properly. Maybe you know the street. I was walking up City Road into Newtown, marvelling, absolutely gobsmacked. How is it even possible? I didn't know it was possible to have such clear peripheral vision. I remember pinching myself. I can see that car. I can see that light. I'm used to that. But the leaves on the trees, how are they possibly there all this time? They're so clear. I'd been wearing glasses at that point for over a decade and had totally forgotten that there's more to clear vision than just the single object that you're looking at and focusing on. And on that day, now with trial contact lenses, for the very first time, I was discovering that the entire field of vision, everything was growing crisper by the minute. And I hadn't even known that I'd lost it. Hold that picture. We are now deep into what is sometimes known as John's Book of Signs. After the majestic prologue, his introduction to the eternal Word now come in humble human flesh, more than half his gospel can be labelled the Book of Signs. Runs from the middle of chapter 1 all the way to the end of chapter 12. The Book of Signs. Yes, there are individual encounters, there's crowd dialogue, there's extended teaching. But amid all of that, there are 7 grand signs lovingly recorded by our eyewitness reporter. Now, the thing about a sign is that a sign signifies something. That's what a sign is meant to do. It signifies something. And the sign might read, one of my favourite ones, Sydney Cricket Ground. Or the sign might say, wrong way, go back. Or it might say, gentlemen. No one spots the sign and says, okay, let's have a party, here's a sign. What's important is not the sign. What's important is what the sign signals, what it points to or what it warns of. This episode today in John chapter 9 is the 6th of 7 major, I think, compelling signs. And John wants us to know, sure, the sign is impressive, but don't be too dazzled by just the sign itself. Make sure you don't miss what the sign is pointing to. What is the sign pointing to? Or what is the sign warning us about? Now, I've said before, and no doubt will say again, part of the problem with spiritual blindness, unlike physical blindness, with spiritual blindness, the blind person is blind even to his own blindness. When you're spiritually blind, you're blind even to your own blindness. Now, it's not every day that you get to watch someone in the very process of gaining new sight, unless you happen to work as an optometrist or if there's a secret ophthalmic surgeon in the room that I don't know about. This first century beggar, and I'm just going to call him Ben, I thought he should have a name. This first century beggar knows perfectly well that he's physically blind, but there's something else that he doesn't yet know. And in the course of this episode, in addition to his physical blindness being reversed, we get to watch as the scales of his spiritual blindness slide away, even as certain others lose the tiny bit of sight that they had long assumed they had. I found this quote helpful. Jesus doesn't come into a world full of people aware of their own need, because they're spiritually blind and not self-aware. Jesus doesn't come into a world full of people aware of their own need. Many have their own inadequate lights, which they are too proud to relinquish for the true light, which now shines. Now, Jesus doesn't come into a world full of people aware of their own need. Okay, the setting. In terms of the exact timeline, it's a bit hard to nail down, but I think this is sometime in those early weeks after the drama of Jesus' extraordinary teaching about himself during and after the harvest, the harvest time festival of tabernacles. So chapters 7 and 8 focus in on that teaching. If I had to put a date on it, I'd say that's 6 months before Jesus' final earthly Passover. Maybe this is 5 months before Jesus' final earthly Passover. 5 months out. Clearly, he's walking the streets in Jerusalem with his disciples when he encounters Ben the beggar. Now, was it widely known that Ben had been born blind? We're not told how they know this at the beginning of the episode. Even if blindness can become part of a person's sense of identity, I've never met new parents who would willingly choose this for their newborn. So is this beggar sitting there begging? Is he carefully winding his way through the streets with a so-called white cane, or whatever the ancient equivalent was, better called a mobility cane? The disciples see him and they are moved with compassion. Actually, not at all. There is no compassion. Rather than leaping to help, I think they sound rather blasé about this blind man. They simply make him an object of their theological curiosity. Jesus, his suffering surely must be what someone deserved. Yeah. So whose fault was it? Who's to blame? Verse 2, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, I'm so glad that they posed this question. Is suffering a direct consequence of some specific sin? That's a good question. It's true that were there no sin in the world, then there would be no suffering in the world. And it's true that some specific sins lead to specific suffering. But in God's kindness, and this is where Jesus repoints them, we don't live in a simple tit-for-tat world where past failures somehow loop back as present consequences like a cosmic punishment, or people say it's a Hindu idea, bad karma. We don't live in a world like that, which is a kindness of God. And if you want to check out this further, go and read the book of Job. It's a damagingly false theological assumption to say that surely if there's suffering, it must be the consequence of some specific sin. No. And Jesus' answer, I don't think he's saying, no, they're not sinners. He's saying, this is not the consequence of some specific sin. Though what Jesus does is much bigger than that. He very quickly switches from the question of cause to the question of purpose. It's like the cause is the genetic question, and he goes to the telic question. He goes from don't worry about the cause, ask about the purpose. What is this for? What might his suffering be for? And I think you could very helpfully ask exactly the same question about, say, burnout or PTSD or anorexia or unemployment or insidious cancers or pained relationships. What might this suffering be for? Jesus responds, verse 3, "Now neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened." What was this for? "So that the work of God might be displayed in his life." That's what it's for. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And you may remember that Jesus has already taught back in chapter 8, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And very clearly, particularly in verse 4 there, Jesus has a vivid sense that his own stay in this world is now growing quite short. And so he seizes the initiative. Notice that Ben the beggar hasn't yet said even a word. And from Jesus' perspective, it's time for a live action demo. Let's go. And often when I'm reading something like this, I really do try to imagine it deeply. And I thought, how long does it take? You're going to spit on the ground. How long does it take to get enough spittle, enough saliva to make a little mud? I reckon this has got to be a couple of minutes. And multiple goes. I reckon. Does Jesus, while he's doing this, explain to Ben the beggar what he's doing? The actual sign is reported very simply and succinctly in verses 6 and 7. Having said this, Jesus spat on the ground, he made some mud with the saliva and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now, you may wonder, why the mud? Why the little clod of clay? Couldn't Jesus heal with a mere word? That's what he did in the second sign and the third sign. Why the mud? And it's a kind of distracting question, but a curious one. It's hard to know. Could it be that he's stalling a little so that he can have a conversation and assure the blind man that he actually is attending to his obvious need and explaining how this is going to work? I'm going to do this and then you're going to do that. And otherwise, when the man eventually reports what happened, he wouldn't even know how to describe it. There was this something on my eyelids, something on my eyes, something. Or it could be that Jesus doesn't want the sign to slide by too quickly. Perhaps more likely, he wants this fellow actually to do something in a kind of responsive faith. He wants him to do something. Or else, and this idea comes from some of the very early theologians of the first Christian centuries who suggested maybe Jesus is remembering how humanity was formed in the first place from the dust of the earth. And he wants this to be like a little act of new creation. There's a thought. Though I think there's something in that. I actually think more likely Jesus doesn't want to draw attention to himself. It's only 5 months until his final earthly Passover. He's right here in Jerusalem. He wants to deal with Ben the beggar's obvious need, but he needs this healing to happen at some distance from himself so that he can't be quickly and easily identified. Interesting pondering. Why the mud? Why this little clod of clay? Though far more important in the mud is the much bigger question of allowing the blind to see. In the Old Testament, who is it who gives sight to the blind? You might read Psalm 146. Who is it who gives sight? Who is it alone who gives sight to the blind? And moreover, in the ancient prophecies of Isaiah, 3 times, Isaiah says that there is a day coming when the blind will receive their sight, and the blind receiving their sight will be an unparalleled sign that the Messiah has come. Here's the first of those in Isaiah. In that day, the deaf will hear, and out of gloom and darkness, the eyes of the blind will see on that day, says Isaiah, not knowing it's 700 years away. On that day. This is much more important than the mud. He's starting to see what the sign might signify. So he goes to the pool of Siloam, he washes and comes home seeing. And that's the sign. John might recount it unspectacularly, but the neighbours hardly think this is a run-of-the-mill occurrence. They're looking at him going, how? How? What? How? But much more important than the sign is what it signifies. Much, much more important than the medical question is the Christological question. Who could possibly do this? And the faith question. How might people react? You may or may not have noticed that Jesus already in this episode has quietly slipped away from centre stage. In fact, he slipped off stage. And so now we get to watch Ben the Beggar's colourful, blunt, brave personality emerge as they quiz him. First the neighbours, and then there's an unofficial investigation that gets underway just before Kathy comes. So that the neighbours, verse 8, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Yeah, surely. Others, no, he only looks the same. He himself says, I'm the man. Well, then the obvious question, how? How are your eyes opened? And he tells his little story. It was the man they called Jesus. Where is this man? They ask him. Oh, I don't know. Because for Ben the beggar, he doesn't even know what Jesus looks like. He only knows his voice. Okay, verse 13, let's go. I love the gentle comedy in here. It's so incongruous. Because these are some of the top Bible scholars in the land, but evidently they seem to have forgotten their Bibles. Oh, what could it possibly signify? Isaiah, I wonder, what could it possibly signify when a man born blind, this is unprecedented, it's unparalleled. What could it mean? When he's given his sight. They are stuck on the medical question. And also a very particular kind of legal question. Hang on, hasn't our traditional oral law been breached here? They're stuck on those. When there's a gigantic messianic question staring them in the face, plus a profound faith question. Might this at last incline their hearts towards their true Messiah? Or not even this? They even stoop to ask this. No doubt they think of him as a gutter theologian. They stoop to ask this gutter theologian what he thinks it all means, and he bravely testifies, and then he even has a crack at arguing with them on their own terms. After the preliminary questioning, his big interim conclusion, and it's a seriously big interim conclusion, verse 17, what have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. Now that's in line with the woman at the well, back in chapter 4. And it's in line with the vast crowd with their hungry tummies satisfied, back in chapter 6. And perhaps, given the pretty heavy social pressure that's being applied, perhaps the word prophet is the highest acclaim that he dares to utter under questioning. I think at that stage, he's beginning to see clearly. But amid the dazzle of a bright world and the pressure of interrogation, I think Ben the beggar is still putting all the pieces together. Meantime, a heavy mist is falling on the hearts of his interrogators. The heart of the problem is that they are stubbornly and perilously unwilling to believe. They're unwilling. In their deepening spiritual blindness, they are bafflingly and I think grotesquely blind to their own blindness. In verse 16, we hear a majority opinion and a minority opinion. The majority opinion is that Jesus is not from God, and they will marshal whatever evidence they can muster to discredit him and justify themselves. Because after all, don't they know better? Aren't they the Bible scholars? Actually, this attitude is still scarily common today. Don't we know better? People think. Don't I know better? People whom you know and love genuinely believe that they know better. Someone once put it this way: underneath all the can'ts, I can't believe because, underneath all the can'ts, there's one big stubborn won't. I won't believe. Underneath all the can'ts is a tragically blind and culpable won't. They simply have no room for Jesus. And so, verse 18, they refuse to believe. Then poor Ben the beggar's parents are hauled in for questioning. I love how, knowing that this is written down some 50 years later, old John recalls a much younger John absorbing every detail, drinking it all in. Wow, take notes. Don't miss this. And now these slightly panicky parents are brusquely interrogated. Is this your son? Was he really born blind? How is it that he can now see? Well, yes, it's him, but don't ask us how. And there's the little note in there that they were afraid. Did young John get to go and chat with them? Did he interview them and get some inside information as they scuttle backstage? So now the inquisitors try to squeeze him. goading him under intimidating pressure. And give glory to God. That's like swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Because anything else is an offence before God. Presumably, at least some of these Pharisees had been present not that long ago when Jesus had the hide to claim that he was sinless, chapter 8, verse 46. Is it best practice for a lawyer to put words in the witness's mouth? Given their majority opinion that Jesus is not from God, oh, how they squirm at his brave testimony. Verse 25, okay, I'll stick to the facts. Whether this man is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. And how can you argue with that? I think it's gradually dawning on him that the light of the world has come in flesh, and yes, it's not just physical sight. He can truly see things he's never seen before. I think the little word in verse 27, the little word "to," is telling. Do you want to become his disciples too? And is this the moment when his own heart is now aligning with his Messiah? Is this the moment he's finally grasping who it is who has just healed him? They hit back with their sanctimonious contempt. We're disciples of Moses. And watching all this unfold, young John will one day, when he's old, summarise the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. But these guys are culpably blind, and they're growing blinder by the minute. Isaiah, who remembers what Isaiah said about a situation like this? Verse 30, Ben the beggar takes his final stand. He says, this is the really, really remarkable thing. Your unbelief in the face of the evidence is more of a miracle than my cure. Are you saying that you, the religious experts, somehow can't work out a simple thing like this? And he schools them, which they don't like. He schools them. He argues, perhaps not with finesse, but with a certain logic and with deep conviction. You've decided he's not from God, but, pardon the pun, I can't see any alternative. Surely he is. I think it's probably for his good that he finds himself cast away from Jesus' enemies. Now let's listen to the last segment, picking up at verse 36. Thanks, Kathy. It's a jarring twist in the tale. And because of this twist in the tale, the original title that I wrote down for this sermon was New Blindness. Their stubborn hearts leave them more and more fixated. We know better. We know better. They proudly assume that they can see truth perfectly well, thank you very much, and they can see truth far better than most other people. And unlike physical blindness, spiritual blindness includes being tragically blind to one's own blindness. In their arrogance, the moment to repent is rapidly slipping away. Even though Jesus didn't come to condemn, they stand condemned already if they die with real guilt unatoned by him. I gave you a quote earlier. Here's the full quote. Jesus doesn't come into a world full of people aware of their own need. Many have their own inadequate lights, which they are too proud to relinquish for the true light, which now shines. The effect of the true light is to blind them, since they willfully close their eyes to it. Their sin abides precisely because they are so confident of their righteousness. So I was going to run with the title, New Blindness, but isn't new sight better? Or new vision? Other than 2001 with those trial contact lenses in, my other experiences of gaining astonishingly wonderful physical sight happened in 2017 and 2022 after cataract surgeries on my left and right eyes. I suspect, personally, that if it were not for modern ophthalmology, for which I'm very thankful, if it were not for two skillful eye surgeons with state-of-the-art equipment, I may well be legally blind already. The day after each of those operations, as the covers came off, I emerged dazzled by a world that was just so bright. Even on a cloudy day, it was so bright, so kind of blue-white, so gleaming. Awakening each morning for weeks, I couldn't believe just how brilliantly bright my new world seemed. But for Ben the beggar, this is so much grander. This sixth sign. Wow. Sure, he's been forcibly kicked out, but Jesus knows. Jesus cares. Verse 35, when Jesus heard that he'd been thrown out, he went and found him. And he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" That is, whatever others might think of me, what about you? Ben's highly attuned hearing could hardly forget that voice if he tried. "I know who you are." Well, he asks, "Who is the Son of Man? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus says, "You've now seen him." It's a big enough explode your world that he can see. But now on the very first day that he can see, he's seen him. He's seen the coming Son of Man. And Jesus says, in fact, the Son of Man is the one speaking with you this very moment. How will he respond? "Lord, I believe." And he worships him. He worships him. I presume that means he prostrates himself. He falls to his knees in humble worship, in adoration. You know, for any grown man to discover that Jesus is fully worthy of worship is a sublime and life-changing discovery. Or I can say that more generally, for any grown man or woman to discover that Jesus is fully worthy of worship. That's a sublime and life-changing discovery. Again, I think young John is drinking in all the details, slowly forging his own conclusion too. He's not going to get there nearly as quickly as Ben the previously blind beggar. It's going to take John a long time to figure this out. For Ben, he now knows that this is what his life is for. And he bows in humbled worship before the heaven-sent Redeemer. At the core of things, this is what my life is for. To adore him. So now, what does this sixth sign signify? What does it signify? Well, either Jesus is a dangerous pretender and should never be trusted by anyone, or else he is the finest, purest, most powerful Lord and Redeemer of all. And he is to be adored, trusted and adored. There's no middle ground. This healing is a sweet foretaste of the day when all maladies, all impairments, all sicknesses, all of it will finally be healed forever. So even as we yearn for that kingdom to come, with no more suffering, while we wait, will you worship him too? Will you adore him? Amen.